Professor Richard Wolff says the economy is going to get a lot worse. He's predicting something like or worse than the Great Depression. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the phone with us is Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of democracyatwork.info, author of numerous books. His most recent, Understanding Socialism. His website's democracyatwork.info and rdwolff with 2fs.com. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolff, P-R-O-F, as in Professor Wolff, W-O-L-F-F. Professor Wolff, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
I am very curious to hear your thoughts on where we're at. I think last week when we talked, or maybe it was even the week before that, I had said to a congressman on this program after the first stimulus was passed, I said it's going to take at least $10 trillion to get us out of this hole, or to get us through the year. We're going to have to basically make up for an economy that's not running. We have now 10 million people out of work. Are people's jobs going to be there when they go back? What's America going to look like economically a year from now? And banks are warning that Trump's small business loan program is headed for a total disaster. Your thoughts on these things, sir?
Well, I think that the truth of it is nobody knows, and I'm not going to get myself into difficulty with you and your listeners by pretending that I could answer that question. There are simply too many variables, number one, and too much is happening too quickly for us to understand. I mean, when I saw the numbers this week of the increase in people applying for unemployment, where we're losing, 1 million people a day or some astronomical number of people basically losing their jobs, losing their incomes, you have to shake your head in disbelief. In a few short weeks, we have gone from an economy that the president of our country referred to as the greatest in the world to an economy that looks to us now, and I mean this seriously, to be entering into a depression, the likes of which we've only seen once before, namely in the 1930s. A literal, complete breakdown in which millions of people have no job, in which vast portions of our business community have effectively stopped functioning, and in which the next steps are so scary and so unknown that everyone is in a limbo of sorts, with the only extra weird part of it being that we're isolated in our little living situations, being told that it's life-threatening to go outside. I mean, under such circumstances, making predictions is very difficult. I can tell you that the behavior of the Federal Reserve, the money that they've been pumping in, records amounts, the interest rates that have been low for 15 years, now even lower, have totally failed. I mean, let's be real clear. 2 weeks ago, the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates by 0.5 point. Everybody said, wow, it had no positive effect that anyone can discern. A week later, they cut the interest rate, that time by 1%. Everyone said, wow, twice, and it was again a total failure. The only thing you can say, and even that without certainty, is that it would have been even worse, perhaps, if they hadn't done it, but that's not much comfort. And now we see this $2 trillion fiscal program of stimulus, and all I can do as an economist and a historian is shake my head and repeat the old phrase, way too little, way too late. Let's remember, if the metaphor, if the parallel is the Great Depression, which it is, we can see that with the unemployment numbers already, then let's compare giving $1,200 to every taxpayer, maybe $500 to their kids, and maybe an extra few hundred to the unemployment check, versus what was done in the 1930s. Roosevelt begins by creating the Social Security system, which we had never had. He declares, at a time when the government is much more in trouble revenue-wise than it is today, and we have much more unemployment even than we have today, he declares the Social Security system is going to give every American 65 years of age or older a check every month for the rest of their lives. rather than a one-time check for $1,200. I mean, you're talking an elephant versus a flea. But that's not all. You know, a few months later, he declares the unemployment compensation system. Everybody who's out of work, and in those days it was tens of millions, is now going to get a check from the federal government every week for a year or longer, dwarfing by many times, a multiple of many times, $1,200 per voter. And finally, the public employment program from 1934 to 41, 15 million Americans were given a federal job, an important job, doing all kinds of important things, so that unemployed people would have a job, would have income, would have the self-esteem that goes with it, would be able to make their mortgage payments to hold on to their home. None of that is being done now. People are being told, go do nothing. No government program for them to be useful to one another, no planning for anything. I mean, the level of failure of this system to either prepare for or cope with this kind of a disaster, it would make you think, gee, this is something new. Nobody could prepare for it. But that's the opposite of the truth. We had a pandemic like this in 1918, worse than this one, at least it looks that way. We know exactly how it works and what needs to be done. A few years ago, we had SARS, we had MERS, we had Ebola. I mean, we know what this is. We know that the spread of the disease is. There is no excuse for the level of breakdown. And what you're seeing is the cascade of consequences when a system has been focused on private profit maximization instead of meeting the needs of a society, which in any rational way would include preparing for something as well known as viral pandemics.
I think we have about 2 minutes to a hard break here. In 1929, the stock market crash in and of itself didn't cause the depression, correct me if I'm wrong, but rather everybody was in debt. There were all these people who owned stocks on margin. And as the stock market went down, those margin calls got hit and people had to, they had to pay back the debts and they couldn't do it. And that's really what crashed the system. We have massive debt in the United States right now. That bubble has not yet started to burst, has it? And do you expect it to?
Yes. I mean, we are much more indebted than we were in 1929. But the irony there, Tom, I have to get this out. The irony is the reason corporations have greater debt now than at any time in American history is that we solved the crash, the dot-com crash in 2000, and then the subprime mortgage crash in 2008-9 by lowering interest rates, making it an invitation with all that money and the low interest rates for every corporation, no matter what the problem it had in its business, to solve it by getting essentially free money and going into levels of debt that are now about to burst because the underlying economy cannot generate the profits out of which that debt was supposed to be repaid. And the government acts as though this catastrophe is somehow not going to happen. That's a mistake.
Right.
And it makes
Are you expecting a large defaults on corporate bonds now?
Well, I think what the government is going to do is basically either allow that to happen, which would be catastrophic, or simply suspend all repayment of credit and have the government finally step in and say what has already been the truth. We are now the economy. The government guarantees everything. Private capitalism has collapsed, and we'll figure out what we do from here.